The very fact that you are listening to me give this lecture is, in a very real sense, an example of the massive impact that globalization has had on culture. You might be anywhere in the world listening to me on a multitude of different devices, and those devices themselves will contain components which were made in a multitude of different countries. Even 10 years ago, this would not have been possible, and in 10 years' time, who knows what might be feasible. Sometimes, in a world of thick globalization, where events are playing out at a rapid, breakneck pace, it's important to take a step back and realise the scarcely believable changes which have taken place in our work over the last generation. Across history, different cultures have always been influenced by each other. In this most recent phase of globalization, this process is intensified and accelerated almost beyond belief. The cause of this has largely been technological, with people gaining new knowledge second by second through Facebook, Twitter, and other forms of social media, whereas in the past this may have only happened on a weekly, monthly, or even annual basis. The rise of these so-called cross-border networks, in addition to the economic and political changes which have occurred at the macro level, have all helped to shape and influence culture across the world. Perhaps the most obvious and notable examples of cultural globalization are the prevalence of American food outlets across the world. The fast food chain McDonald's, for example, has 35,000 locations in 118 countries, and Starbucks, the coffee chain, has more than 21,000 shops. Indeed, critics of this form of cultural globalization use the term McDonaldization as a synonym for globalization. To continue the McDonald's theme, another interesting work on this theme is the influential 1995 work Jihad versus McWorld, written by Benjamin Barber. Here, Barber contrasts two dominant narratives in the contemporary world, namely McWorld, by which he means the globalization of politics, neoliberal economics, and the corporate control of the political process, and Jihad, by which he means tradition and traditional values, often expressed in the form of extreme nationalism or religious orthodoxy and theocracy. For Barber, one of the challenges of globalization is how these two seemingly unreconcilable positions can coexist. One answer to this question, given by Samuel Huntington, as we will see in the next lesson when we discuss his work The Clash of Civilizations, is that they cannot. This discussion leads to one fundamental question at the heart of globalization's impact on culture, namely, does it make people more alike or more different? Does it lead to heterogeneous culture or homogenous culture? For those who argue that the direction of travel is the latter, they argue that the world is becoming Americanized, with local and minority cultures being overwhelmed by the cultural imperialism of the US. One of the flashpoints of cultural homogenization concerns language, or more specifically, linguicide, that is, language death or language murder. Of the roughly 6,500 languages spoken worldwide, there are really only a small handful, including Spanish and Chinese, which really have that much influence. And of these, English is by far and away the most important. This is not a subjective view, but an objective one based on the facts. It is estimated that 80% of the internet is written in English. It is the official or de facto official language for many countries and international organisations, and it is the international language of business. The result of this is that many languages are dying out due to lack of use, at the rate of around 25 a year, or one every fortnight. This could mean that more than 90% of world languages will be extinct by the end of the century. Some liken this to the fate of endangered animals, that languages should be protected at all costs from predators such as English, that languages are repositories of culture, and that every time a language dies, part of the global heritage dies also. Others take a more Darwinian approach, seeing this process as being entirely natural. Minority languages die because people want to learn widely spoken languages, since this will help them get on in life. One final point to note is an interesting and controversial view of cultural homogenization expressed by David Rothkopf. He argues that it is a good thing, since it should lead to less culture-based conflicts and therefore fewer wars. Specifically, he argues that the decline of cultural distinction may be a measure for progress of civilization, a tangible sign of enhanced communication and understanding. For those on the other side of the coin, globalization can actually lead to increased cultural diversity. Indeed, what can emerge is a hybrid culture which mixes together global and local elements. As Manfred Steger argues, the contemporary experience of living and acting across cultural borders means both the loss of traditional meanings and the creation of new symbolic expressions. Indeed, some commentators have argued that modernity is slowly giving way to a new postmodern framework characterized by a less stable sense of identity and knowledge. One interesting and influential theorist of cultural globalization is Arjun Apudari, who argues that the new global cultural economy has to be seen as a complex, overlapping, disjunctive order. This order is the mixture of distinct but interrelated flows, or scapes, which he identifies as follows. Ethnoscapes, the movement of people, which is a result of readily available and more affordable transportation. Mediascapes, the movement of media around the world and how it allows distant cultures to view each other. This may, at times, create a narrow or biased image of a distant culture. Technoscapes, the flow of technology, mechanical goods and software. Financescapes, the movement of money, and ideoscapes, the movement of political ideas from one area to another. In summary, whilst the pattern of cultural globalization has been from west to east, as noted at the beginning of this lecture, it is not only one-way traffic. There has also been a noticeable and growing east to west cultural transmission through, for example, anime from Japan, Bollywood films from India, and of course Gangnam Style from South Korea. It is very possible that the growing economic power of, in particular, Asia and specifically China will see increased cultural influence in other parts of the world.